Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Fascinating ACC matchup. The Miami Hurricanes heading on the road to go play Cal. They'll across the country road trip, 10:30 Eastern time kickoff. The boys are getting put to work with this Miami Hurricanes team. It's obviously we like talking about this team. We're up till midnight Friday night talking about them. Probably going to be up past midnight again Saturday night talking about them. They'll against the Cal team that I think what's so fascinating about this matchup. I think there are some similarities between Cal and Virginia Tech. I think they have a quarterback that can extend plays and get outside the pocket in a very similar way that Kyron Drones was able to hurt Miami on Friday night. They play very, very good defense with a very good pass rush, which Virginia Tech had as well. Really excited to see what adjustments Miami might be making in this football game going on the road against Cal. Fired up to get into this one. Now, before we do, and as always, number one, the amount of support for these preview prediction episodes, it's been amazing. We can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. That is the beauty of doing these kind of episodes. A lot of different ways you can look at this football game, right? Miami coming off by far their worst performance in the 2024 season. Cal coming off a bye. Miami's going across the country. Really excited to get into this one. Dill, I want to start with this Cal offense going up against this Miami Hurricanes defense that struggled, for lack of better terms, against Virginia Tech. What's the number one thing that when you went back and watched Miami, Virginia Tech again, kind of prepping for this one, what do you want to see them clean up heading into this road game against Cal?
I mean, just be more disciplined in their pass rush at the end of the day. I think that was really starting to hurt them. You saw Kyron Jones get out of the pocket, and I think they scored 2 touchdowns off of that kind of
Yes.
broken play type football. And Mendoza's really good at doing that. So that's kind of why I think you kind of get a chance to rectify it really quickly because that's really all. I don't think Cal has much that they can just lean on to do against Miami. They don't have like an identity where they're just like, okay, well, this is going to really work or marching up and down the field. But one thing they've been able to do is create broken plays, create chaos, and Mendoza's been really, really good when the play breaks down. So again, you look at what Miami is doing. They weren't getting Kyron Jones on the ground. They weren't maintaining any leverage, and he was able to create a lot off of that broken stuff. That to me is a fundamental. If Miami does this, I don't really know what Cal can go to move the ball particularly well.
By far the biggest mismatch in this game is this Cal offensive line versus Miami Hurricanes pass rush. And quite frankly, Miami's pass rush has been really good. It's very good. Like the talent that they have, even without guys like Ruben Bain so far, it's been very, very good. That being said, you saw them really it was like not only rush lanes, but angles, like specifically a guy like Elijah Alston. Drones is an athlete. You got to keep your outside shoulder free here, and you got to keep him inside the pocket. They're going to have an opportunity to get right here. And I think you made the biggest point. You look at Cal, they're giving up sacks on 12.8% of dropbacks. Florida State had 7 sacks, 12 tackles for loss against Cal. They did a really nice job keeping Mendoza in the pocket. Who didn't do a very nice job is Auburn. Auburn was extremely disruptive, just like Miami was against Virginia Tech, but didn't keep Mendoza in the pocket. He was able to get outside and create a little bit. That's how Auburn lost that football game, also turning the football over 4 times. That certainly doesn't help. That being said, I'm excited to see Miami get their chance to rectify that aspect of their defense, because if there was one thing that went wrong, it was probably that the most. Secondly, you got to get these running backs to the ground. Both of these running backs, but obviously headlined by Jaden Ott, very similar to Bashal Tootin. Like, these are running backs that if you miss tackles, it's not just going for 15 yards, it's going for 50 yards, and it's going to the house. Dill, I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast ever. Francisco Mauigoa didn't play very good football for Miami Friday night. And again, these kids are allowed to have bad games, but you got to clean it up, especially if you're going to be kind of the stalwart of this Miami Hurricanes defense. He is all over the football field. When you have the opportunity to get these running backs to the ground, you got to make sure you're doing it against Cal Saturday night.
And I think Cal do a decent job of making them make those plays in space because, again, they're just not going to be able to attack in the middle of this Miami defense. So I think,
Agreed.
again, they've done a pretty good job getting the ball to the perimeter, getting some of that vertical passing game going. And with that comes being able to tackle really effectively in space, which obviously something you kind of mentioned. Miami certainly didn't do a great job with, and it's not like it's been a problem for Miami at all in this season. They did a really good job against Florida, who has some obviously pretty good weapons like Badger and Wilson. But again, you're playing a Cal team that if you don't want to let this get into a bit of a barn burner or something closer than it should be at the end of the day, those type of plays that they weren't making against Virginia Tech, they need to make them.
Yeah, you don't want to give up. You never want to give up explosive plays, but specifically to a team like Cal that, again, no disrespect to Cal, but what they're working with and how banged up they are on the offensive line. I don't see this Cal team going 12 plays, 80 yards and scoring on Miami very consistently. How I could see them putting up some points, kind of what they did against Auburn, like creating some plays, creating some explosives, kind of playing a little bit backyard football. Look, Miami's the more talented team, specifically along the defensive line. You got to dominate there, but you got to keep Mendoza in the pocket. Those are the two things we're looking for. Last thing, you got to clean up third downs. I expect Lance Gidger to do that. Like Virginia Tech was 9 of 14 on third downs. It didn't seem like they know what they wanted to do. I don't think they had a really good game plan in terms of how to deal with Kyron Drones. Like they were rushing 3, dropping 8 at times. They were going cover 0 at times. I hope to see a little bit more of a clear game plan of how do we want to attack these third downs against Cal Saturday night. Let's move over to arguably, I think, the more fascinating matchup that we're going to have in this football game. Cal's defense, 12.7 points per game. That's number 9 in the country, going up against the Miami Hurricanes offense that I think has the Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback here. He's my vote to win the Heisman Trophy. 47.8 points per game, 4th in the country, 8.6 yards per play. That's number 1 in the country. Dill, we talked about this before we went live. Let's have this conversation. Cal's defense, kind of similar to Virginia Tech, a really good secondary, headlined by an elite cornerback in Marcus Harris, a really good pass rush, specifically from those edge rusher positions. Miami struggled a little bit in pass protection. Cam Ward had to do a lot of Houdiniing in the pocket. The best way to slow a really good pass rush down is to have some balance and make them respect what you're doing running the football. Miami didn't really do that against Virginia Tech, but more importantly, like hasn't really done that throughout the 2024 season. And again, it's hard to be critical of this Miami Hurricanes offense when you are averaging 8.6 yards per play. You're scoring almost 50 points per game. But against the Cal secondary and pass rush, that is quite good. Do you think Miami should maybe lean into that run game a little bit more and kind of keep this Cal defense respecting this Miami Hurricanes rushing attack and, more importantly, the balance of the offense?
Honestly, I think Miami should probably shooting for that just in general. I think it's such a luxury to be able to be really, really balanced. And I think, again, you look at what they have on their offensive line, especially if Rivers is able to come back.
Yes.
I think he is a bit of a difference maker, frankly. He's a really,
Yeah.
really good run blocker. Obviously, when they have that starting 5, they should be a real problem. And Markel Bell, I think he's played really pretty solid as a second string guy. But I think that when you get Rivers back, you can really start rolling. And I think just generally you want to be able to do it. It's not like taking anything.
But the thing that's frustrating to me, and sorry to interrupt you, like they can do it. Like they're averaging 5.9 yards per carry. That's 11th best in the country. And I get that number might be a little bit skewed because a lot of rushing production is coming off some kind of explosive plays, maybe in the second half, kind of garbage time. I would like to see Miami run the football better in the first half with a guy like Damian Martinez. But on the same token, it's like I'm not going to get up here and bang the table for Miami to take the football out of Cam Ward's hands because the way this kid is playing at the quarterback position is kind of some next level stuff. One of the keys that I'm looking at, Dell, is that Cal kind of got pushed around against Florida State too, and Auburn. Like Auburn was able to run the football. I believe they averaged almost 7 yards per carry in that football game. I think Miami can move Cal off the line of scrimmage a little bit more. I think they should have success running the football. And then secondly, you got to try to find your matchups, right? Marcus Harris is probably a guy that you don't want to be throwing that too often because of how good he is. But I do think there are some other players in this Cal secondary that you can get after. That's another luxury that the Miami Hurricanes have. Like you go back to last year was kind of Xavier Restrepo or bust. Now you have Xavier Restrepo, who's an absolute dog. You guys know he's one of my favorite players in all of college football. But you also have Isaiah Horton. You also have Sammy Brown. You also have the tight ends that are becoming difference makers for this Hurricanes offense. Jacoby George as well for Miami. I think you want to find your matchups because as you have so much firepower, there's just not going to be a ton of teams that can match all the firepower that Miami has on offense.
Yeah, that's been something they've done a really, really good job doing. I think is spreading the ball around and getting to their matchups and whether they're playing a team that has really, really good boundary corners like a Virginia Tech and then getting to the tight ends using Restrepo, obviously, a lot, who's going to be involved, obviously, in any game. But I think they just are a little bit more balanced, at least from a passing standpoint. They do have more weapons. They have the tight end they can go to. I think their boundary wide receiver position arguably is playing better than it did last year with the emergence of guys like Horton, Brown, and even Jacoby George, who I think is probably taking a bit of a step. So I think they have more ways to hurt you. I think, again, when you look at Cal, I think they should be able to find their matchups better in some of the teams like Auburn and Florida State, who really, really struggled. I think just by the nature of those two teams just aren't nearly as developed from a passing standpoint. So, again, I think Cal's defense has looked really, really good on paper. They've played two big Power 5 teams, but teams that certainly have struggled on the offense side of the ball,
Yes.
especially at the quarterback spot. So, again, I think this Miami team's a bit of a different or quite a bit of a
That
different.
is fair. That's a fair, like, we talk about Cal's numbers, right? Top 10 in scoring defense in the country. Like, and San Diego State flat out stinks too. Like, you talk about a group of 5 teams that are like some of the worst in the country. So it's like, how good is this Cal defense? That probably goes into. No, I think the Cal defense is good. That's not me getting up here and saying Cal's defense ain't good. Like, I do think it's really good, but like, how good is it when you're going up against one of the best offenses in the country? That's a question. Dill, let's get into the pick. 11.5 points for Miami on the road. I'll start. I really like Miami in this one. I think you kind of got that ugly performance out of the way. You played much better in the second half. I would be very surprised if Miami comes out and doesn't play some of their better football after a really sloppy football on Friday night against Virginia Tech. And quite frankly, if they come out and play their best football, I don't necessarily know if it matters what Cal does because I think Miami's covering this 11.5 point number.
I'm very much on Miami. I just don't like. I mean, I get Cal's been able to make some things happen against schools that I don't think I would have thought they'd be able to make things happen against. But I don't think Auburn or Florida State are playing at the level they obviously should be. But also, like, I don't think it's reliable just to make plays the
Yeah.
way they've kind of made them on the offense side of the ball. And I don't want to totally say they don't have something because their vertical passing game, it is solid. They are able to get the ball down the field in more structured manners, but just they don't have anything they can really do consistently.
Yeah.
It feels like on the offensive side of the ball. And to me, when you go play a team like Miami that I think can really put the points up on the board in a way that they haven't really seen in offense, I think that can really stress kind of what you're doing on the offense side of the
And
ball, especially with that offense.
I think secondly, like because Miami struggled so much with dealing with drones and getting outside the pocket, it's really hard to see them struggling again against Cal on Saturday night. Like I feel like that's going to get addressed over the next couple of weeks in practice. The boys are both on the Hurricanes. 10:30 Eastern time kickoff, Dill. We're going to have to get some energy drinks for this one. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.